Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some fascinating reader suggestions today, digging into the future of energy. Specifically, we're looking at the transition to renewables.
Always a hot topic.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the articles you've all sent us have been super optimistic about renewables taking over, painting a picture of a world running on sunshine and wind.
Right.
But then we came across this piece from FinShots, and it really gave us pause. They're making the case that oil isn't going away anytime soon.
Interesting. So are they saying renewables aren't the silver bullet everyone's hoping for?
That's kind of the gist, yeah. They actually start off talking about electric vehicles and how quickly they're gaining traction. Do you know India is aiming for 30% electric vehicles on their roads by 2030? That's huge.
Ambitious, for sure.
And Norway is practically a pioneer already. Something like 80% of their new car sales are electric.
Wow, yeah. I'd heard they were ahead of the game, but 80% is really impressive.
Right. So you see those numbers and you think, wow, oil's days are numbered.
Yeah, it's easy to jump to that conclusion.
But the article points out, driving around town, commuting to work, that's just one slice of the oil demand pie.
Right. What about all those planes in the sky?
Exactly. They use a great example in the article of Boeing 747, one of those massive jumbo jets.
Oh, yeah.
Those things can guzzle something like 30,000 gallons of jet fuel on a single 10-hour flight.
Whoa, 30,000? That's insane.
Right. Now, try to imagine the size of the battery you need to replace that. It boggles the mind.
And the weight, they'd never get off the ground.
Exactly. And it's not just planes, right? Think about those gigantic cargo ships hauling stuff across the ocean.
Oh, absolutely. Global trade depends on those things.
Totally. And those things are like floating cities running on massive amounts of fuel.
Yeah, I've heard rumblings about hydrogen-powered ships being developed.
Yeah, there's some buzz about hydrogen and biofuels, but they're still in the very early stages, really experimental.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how that technology develops, but it's definitely not a quick fix.
Not by a long shot.
Yeah.
And, I thought this was a really interesting point they made. It's easy to get caught up in the energy side of things, but we forget how much we rely on oil for things that aren't fuel.
Oh, totally. It's in so many products we use every day.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We're talking plastics, obviously, but also fertilizers, cosmetics, even some medicines.
It's true. It's everywhere.
And this article really drove home the point that weaning ourselves off oil isn't as simple as flipping a switch and switching to a different energy source.
Mm-hmm.
It means completely changing how we make and use a huge range of everyday products.
It's a massive undertaking. Like, how do you even begin to tackle that?
Right. It's a huge challenge. And then on top of that, there's this other thing the article calls the digital dilemma, which I thought was really fascinating.
Okay, digital dilemma. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time online.
Who doesn't these days?
Right. But I never really stopped to think about the energy consumption of all that scrolling, all that streaming, all those Google searches.
It's not something that's top of mind, for sure.
But the article points out that those data centers that power our online world, they are massive energy hogs. And get this, by 2030, their power consumption is projected to explode by about 160%.
160%? Seriously?
Yeah, it's crazy. Every Google search, every conversation with ChatGPT, every little thing we do online adds up.
It's like death by 1,000 clicks. Or energy consumption by 1,000 clicks, I guess.
Right. And if a lot of that electricity is still being generated by, you guessed it, oil, then all that doom scrolling is actually contributing to the problem.
It's like we're stuck in this weird energy catch-22. It's a bit ironic, isn't it? We're all trying to reduce our carbon footprint, but our digital lives are actually making it worse.
It's definitely a tricky situation.
Yeah.
But hey, we're all about exploring all sides of the issue here, right? And to be fair, the article does acknowledge the progress being made in renewable energy. They even mentioned that solar energy is like 90% cheaper than it was just a decade ago.
Yeah, the cost of solar has plummeted, that's for sure.
It's incredible, right? No wonder solar panels are popping up on rooftops everywhere.
Absolutely. And it's not just solar either. Wind energy is also making huge strides.
So we're heading in the right direction, at least in terms of cost and adoption.
It definitely seems like it, but, and the article makes this point really clear, there's still a big challenge with renewables reliability.
Okay, so we're back to the whole sun doesn't always shine, wind doesn't always blow.
Exactly. It's like, trying to run a marathon, but you only get a burst of energy every now and then.
Okay, I get it. But seriously, how big of a problem is this, really?
Well, they give this example of North America. On average, solar farms there are only generating power about 20% of the time.
Wait, really? Only 20%? I guess it doesn't always feel that sunny out there.
Yeah, it's a lot lower than most people think. It really highlights the challenge of relying solely on a power source that's so dependent on the weather.
So what do we do? What about battery storage? I keep hearing about these amazing advances in battery technology.
Batteries are definitely part of the solution. But right now, we just don't have the capacity to store enough energy to power a city, let alone a whole country, for very long. It's just not feasible at this point.
Okay, so if we're not ditching oil anytime soon and renewables aren't quite there yet, what other options are on the table? What did this FinShots article say?
Well, they brought up something that might surprise you. Nuclear energy.
Nuclear? Really?
Yeah.
But what about the whole safety issue and the waste disposal problem?
Those are valid concerns, absolutely. But there's been a lot of talk lately about these things called small modular reactors, or SMRs for short. They're like mini nuclear power plants designed to be safer and more efficient.
Right, SMRs. I've heard about those. So it's like a nuclear comeback.
In a way, yeah. It's definitely gaining some traction, particularly as we look for more reliable, low-carbon energy sources.
Interesting. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But weren't there concerns about those too? Something about them being targets for terrorism or something?
Yeah, security is definitely something that's being taken very seriously with SMRs. I mean, obviously, no energy source is completely risk-free, right? But the article mentioned that these new reactors are being designed with security as a top priority.
Okay, that's reassuring. But it still seems like there are a lot of pieces to this energy puzzle. What's the bottom line here?
Well, that's actually what I really liked about the FinShots piece. Their main point is that there isn't some magic one-size-fits-all solution.
It's not as simple as just swapping out oil for solar panels, is it?
Right. And trying to force everything to fit this, this idealized vision of a purely renewable future, it might actually do more harm than good, at least in the short term.
How so?
They argued that if we just completely stop investing in oil and gas right now, we could end up with energy shortages and price spikes that hurt everyone, especially the most vulnerable.
That makes sense. So it's more about finding ways to manage the transition, not just hitting the off switch on fossil fuels overnight.
Exactly. It's about being realistic about the time it takes to develop new technologies, build new infrastructure, and change consumption patterns.
So it's a balancing act. And it sounds like we need to be prepared for a future that's going to have a mix of energy sources.
Precisely. Like, think of it as diversifying your investment portfolio.
Okay, that's a good analogy. You don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. You spread the risk, you consider different factors, and you adapt your strategy as needed. Same principle applies to energy.
So what you're saying is we need to get comfortable with a little bit of complexity.
I think so. There's no escaping it. The energy landscape is complex, and any solution that pretends otherwise is probably oversimplifying things.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today. Electric vehicles, jumbo jets, the hidden energy costs of doom scrolling.
It's been quite the deep dive.
It has. And, this FinShots article really challenged us to think beyond the headlines and grapple with some of the less talked about aspects of the energy transition.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype, but it's important to look at all sides of the issue.
Couldn't agree more. And that's what we're all about here, right? Giving you the information you need to form your own conclusions. So to all our listeners, as you continue to explore the world of energy and sustainability, we'll leave you with this question. What do you think will be the biggest hurdle in our quest for a cleaner energy future? Is it the technology, the economics, or something else entirely? Keep those thoughts brewing, and we'll catch you in our next deep dive.